Hello everybody, my name is Jordan DeCrager and today I'm going to be showing you how to segment a hippocampus. So specifically I'm using this protocol from DeCrager et al. 2018 I think it is. I'll post a link to that paper below, and specifically the protocol, the manual segmentation protocol, is in the supplementary materials. And so basically the idea of this protocol is we're going to segment all of the structures inside of the hippocampus that we can see, and then we're going to use some computational anatomy methods afterwards to try and infer some of the structures that we can't see. So things like hippocampal subfields. So first of all, okay, what are we looking at? So this is an ex vivo tissue sample that's been scanned at a 9.4 Tesla MRI scanner at University of Pennsylvania in Paul Yuskovich's lab. And I believe the paper that goes along with this is Adler et al. 2018, I think. And so they were very generous in sharing their data, made it open source. And so here, this is a segmentation I performed, I think also in 2018, that we ultimately didn't end up using. And I should note, they also provided segmentations here, but I'm just doing one totally from scratch here for a few reasons. So one is, it's just a really, really clear image. So I think this is a good learning case for anybody who wants to do this kind of manual segmentation in MRI. This should give you a good idea of sort of what the anatomical ground truth should be. So oftentimes you will find that, yeah, these images are not nearly as clear when you do in vivo scanning. With lower resolutions, you'll get things like partial voluming, and so you'll have all different structures sort of blurring together. But this should just give you an idea, ideally, of how this protocol should be used and what structures you should hope to see. So I'll just walk you through exactly what I'm doing here. So you can see at the top right, there's my mouse. I'm tracing this dark structure. I'm making the label appear and disappear. This is one of the features of the program I'm using. The program is ITK-SNAP. I'll post a link to that as well. And it just has a lot of great little segmentation tools, and it's pretty lightweight. It's a nice tool to use. And so, yeah, I'm just drawing this dark structure. So we call this the dark band, or the SRLM. So that's stratum radiatum, lacunosum, and moleculaire. Basically, these are three different layers of the hippocampal cortical mantle. So I guess you'd call it archicortex rather than neocortex. And within these particular layers, there just happens to be a lot of myelin. And so in a two-weighted scan like this one, you can actually see that layer quite clearly. And this has often been observed in vivo MRI as well. You can see I'm not being exactly perfect with these labels. I'm going into the sort of background black label a little bit. And I'm not too worried about that, partly because when we do this in MRI, which is how we develop this protocol, we'll often have things like cysts or other sort of structures inside the hippocampus along the SRLM. And so I don't really necessarily consider the SRLM to be a pure label most of the time. And so I'm just not going to be too worried that it's not quite a pure label here either. But basically the point of having this label is so that we can do unfolding of this structure. And basically, I could show you how that works in another video, but basically we need this label to separate the sort of inner curl of the hippocampus from the outer curl, and then also the sort of the folds between these little gyrifications or digitations. You can see it quite clearly in the coronal slice. That's the bottom right now. So there's two clear digitations here, and the SRLM also shows within a digitation sort of the going up and going down side of that digitation or gyrification, if you like. So I'm going to spend a long time on this SRLM label because it actually, just having the SRLM label segmented in detail, so first of all, that's important for the unfolding so that we have a good idea of which folds are actually bordering which ones, so that, that's important for the unfolding. And then also, secondly, having a good dark band label will actually give us a lot of information about the overall shape of the hippocampus. So even just looking at the 3D model being constructed here, that's at the bottom left, you can already see the sort of the whole shape of the hippocampus. You can see where a few of the digitations are. And some of the tools that I'll show you in a minute in ITK-SNAP can actually use this. So for example, you can imagine just looking at a slice like this, if you dilate out this SRLM label a little bit, then that will give you a pretty good idea of where hippocampal gray matter, so the lighter structure, is. So that's why I think it's so important to spend a lot of time on this structure. And if you are doing your segmentations yourself, then I'd say it's definitely worth spending a long time to get this label very good. And you can see I'm just working on little details now. I'm looking at all 3 planes of view, looking at 3D model, and just trying to fill in any sort of like holes or gaps, just to get a full 3D reconstruction of this structure. You can see also so this is the tail of the hippocampus, so the posterior of the hippocampus. You can see a few clear little digitations or bumps really in this label. So this is something we will often not see in 3D MRI. I should say in vivo MRI. You really need a high level of detail to see this. So you'll see it sometimes in histological samples, depending on the direction that it's been sliced in, or with ex-vivo scans like this one. So I'm just working on the axial slice, making sure that there are no sort of floating islands of this label, that everything's sort of fully connected with everything else. It can be hard to do when you have out-of-plane problems, which is why you really need to look at the 3D model and the other planes of view. Okay, so here I'm using some of the fancier tools in ITK-SNAP. So this is a erosion and dilation tool that I'm also thresholding the image a little bit with as well. So basically it will allow this label to expand within the white zone, but not in the blue zone. So I've adjusted the thresholds to follow those rules and just capture the darkness of the dark band there, or the SRLM. What I'm doing here now is so this tool doesn't have a simple way to just do pure erosion. So there I mostly just dilated this label out. But what I'm doing now is taking another label and I'm just going to dilate that over our first label in order to effectively have erosion. So I'm thinning the dark band by thickening its surrounding label now. And you might be asking, well, why not just use thresholding to get the whole label in the first place? Why did I have to do all that manual segmentation? Part of the reason for that is the hippocampus is flanked on pretty much all sides by different structures with different contrasts. So maybe you can see in this image when it's not covered in label that so on the top of the hippocampus, so superior to the hippocampus, is the fimbria and the alveus, which are very similar in appearance to the SRLM. Below the hippocampus, we have the white matter of the temporal horn, and then sort of on the medial side, we have the ventricles, and then immediately under that, we'll have thalamus, and it's not in this image, but you'll also see choroid plexus above the hippocampus. And so all of these labels can be easily confused with hippocampus, and they have similar intensities to the dark band especially. And so we really need a really tight sort of spatial prior to know where that is. So now I've moved on a little bit. What I'm doing here, I'm happy with the dark band label I got, and now I'm just uniformly dilating it out in order to return the gray matter of the hippocampus, which again, it immediately surrounds the dark band. So now that I have a good dark band segmentation, I can just dilate that out, and that's a really great way to sort of initialize my gray matter segmentation. You can see I'm also using some thresholding just to get a good idea of exactly where that tissue is. So now I'm going to do some little off-screen magic here. Basically, I saved my dark band label and I separately saved my gray matter label. I'm going to use FSL mask to combine them. And then I will reload them back into ITK-SNAP, and you should see 2 distinct labels. Here we go. So I'm just going to change the colors, I think, really quickly here, but you should see 2. So a gray matter and an SRLM label. I think there's some off-screen magic. There we go. I managed to change the label values there. So we have, green or label 2 for the dark band, and 1 or red for the gray matter label here. And of course, when I did that dilation, I didn't get all of the gray matter that I would like to. In particular, you can see on the medial side, so this would be the subiculum of the hippocampus. There is no SRLM label, so I'm just filling in additional gray matter label all the way to where it meets the neocortex. So you can see where that tissue thickens out quite a bit. That would be the entorhinal cortex, or more posteriorly here, the parahippocampal cortex. And my rule of thumb here is, at least for a first pass, I'm really just going to overestimate how much gray matter is actually part of the hippocampus, And we'll see later on in the protocol, I will cut some of that off later. But just to make things nice and simple for us, we're going to overestimate this, and then we'll use the sort of erosion and dilation with some thresholding in order to get good tissue segmentation, and then we'll draw a boundary sort of heuristically of what we consider to be medial temporal lobe cortex and what we consider to be just within the hippocampus still. So you can see this is clearly not part of the hippocampus. We're in a sulcus posterior to the hippocampus, but I'm just overestimating all the gray matter that might be part of the hippocampus. Again, these are just the ways that I found are really time efficient to do this, and you can apply different strategies as long as you meet the conditions that are specified in the manual protocol that again was attached to our 2019 or 18 neuroimage paper. So here we're in the anterior, so this would be entorhinal cortex below the hippocampus here. Maybe also worth noting, I've made these labels more transparent now. This is another nice feature of ITK-SNAP. You can just see basically what's underneath them. You can toggle them on and off as I'm doing here. Now here we're actually missing a little piece. So this ex vivo tissue sample seems like it got nicked or something. So I'm just painting right over that, even though there's some clear background label. I'm just including that for now because trust me, guys, I know that it's just a little missing piece of tissue. So again, this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. We will use some of the thresholding and erosion and dilation tools later on. Yeah, this is just to get us a good sort of spatial prior of where we expect all of these tissues to be. So here I'm just filling in a little bit of the innermost region of the hippocampus here, so that would be at CA4. And as I mentioned, now I'm going to apply some erosion and dilation, and I'm constraining this with some thresholding to again smooth out these labels. There's a little bit of a little bit of tissue where it probably doesn't belong. You can see little islands, so I'm just creating a surrounding sort of dummy label that I'm going to dilate over this in order to effectively erode it and remove those islands. Just checking on my dark band label. Oh, I think I eroded it too far, so I undid that. If you erode it too far, you'll start to see holes in the dark band, or I should say SRLM label again. And it looks like I just wanted to fill those back in. Again, this was a long time ago that I did the segmentation. I think it was 2018. It's now spring of 2021, so a few years. Maybe this is a good time to mention we're working on and pretty well ready to release some tools to do this automatically using in vivo MRI images. So check out that project. It's called Hip Unfold. I'll post a link to the GitHub, and hopefully the paper should be coming out soon. Those tools are designed for much lower resolution images though. Initially 0.7 millimeter isotropic, and it seems like it will work across a range of different images, but it won't show the level of detail that we see in this really special ex vivo scan. Here I just wanted to really show what's possible to see with some really good MRI scan like this one. What I'm doing here, so I'm actually now replacing some of our gray matter label with a new label for medial temporal lobe cortex. It's a little confusing because it's a white label, so it's hard to see. And the way that I'm actually defining this boundary is mostly looking at the 3D model. So I'm just looking for the point where the hippocampus, the gray matter on the medial side drops directly down. So the formal border is the medialmost aspect of the white matter under the hippocampus. So another way to approximate that is basically where you see this gray matter drop down and then start to move lateral into this collateral sulcus below the hippocampus. So again, I'm just cutting that off. Here I'm using a purple label here, again, using a similar sort of heuristic where in the posterior of the hippocampus, I'm just relabeling it with this purple label. It's transparent on the 3D model just so you can see sort of where I've left hippocampal gray matter label. But basically, the rule is I'm taking off where the hippocampus starts to curve. So it curves medially, and then there's some tissue that curves upward. And so I've basically tried to take off the very posterior tip that curves upward. Here I'm relabeling a similar strategy here. So I'm relabeling hippocampal amygdala transition area. So basically you can see there's a large sort of gray matter structure above the hippocampus. You can see that in the coronal view. And I'm drawing this transition area basically as any part of the hippocampus, hippocampal gray matter that extends more superiorly, so higher than any of these digitations in the rest of the hippocampal head. Here, this is sort of a dummy label. This is just so that I know when I'm looking at the hippocampal, the uncus there, I know which side is medial and which side is, I guess, lateral or sort of continuous with the inside of the hippocampus or the outside of the hippocampus. You can see the protocol for the details of why we need that. It's really, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's basically a mark, like a dummy label. And that is it, guys. So I'll just play over this last little bit so you can see the 3D model again. This hippocampus basically is now ready for unfolding, and you can use our tools to do some computational anatomy with this. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video.